So I have a check for you.
Oh, cool.
Do I have cash for you? Actually, you know what? Pop that card out.
Alice is the only person who gets to put her foot down. Alice is developing an idea of what she wants this to be, and she needs to make it that way. And I think that at the margins, she is open to suggestion, for instance, with the projection of the buttress slab. But I think in many ways, she has felt the need to assert her own judgment in this, and there has never really been an opportunity in this project to say this is the way I think it should be, because there was always somebody to second guess that. There was always somebody to challenge it, and always differences of opinion about it. I have very strong opinions about where the historical exhibit seems to be going. I haven't actually seen what they're doing with it right now for some time. What I've seen are some plans with a lot of walls, and I think it's going to be very directive, very claustrophobic. I think for some people it will be a very difficult experience to get through, because it's essentially generating a much more imposed narrative upon the day and the aftermath than we had started with. Our design philosophy was, first of all, to keep the here and now of the museum separate from the there and then of the event. So you are in this basement, you are under this pool, you are in the memorial, you are in a real place, experiencing through narrative, encountering through narrative and through objects something that once happened here. And that because of the way people will continue to experience this event, probably for generations, it was really important for you to be able to feel that you can get out of it, for you to be able to remember that you're in the here and now with the people you're with, you're not in 9/11, that you can see around the corner, you can see what's coming, you know what's coming next. They're big, clear markers. We had these huge photographs that were markers of the event, but you could always see around them, you could see what was coming. And from what I understand they're doing, it's becoming a much narrower experience where you're never quite able to see around the next corner, or less able to see around the next corner. That for me is really problematic. I'm viscerally opposed to that because I really do think it's wrong, but I may be wrong, I don't know. It's not the exhibit that we started out designing, even though it will in many ways very strongly resemble that. Its essence will have been changed. Which is painful for me personally, and as a designer. It's obviously I'm disappointed that she chose another direction and chose to do it carry it through this part of the project with someone else. But from what I understand they're doing, I also think she had to go to somebody else, because I wouldn't have designed that exhibit. I couldn't have designed that exhibit because it feels like the wrong exhibit to me. Alice is under a tremendous amount of pressure as well. She's got a whole lot of people staring at her from a whole lot of different perspectives, and she is trying to navigate a way through that will work as a museum, not unduly piss anybody off who really shouldn't be pissed off, and it's going to serve a spectrum of needs that she feels very strongly, and I completely agree with her, very strongly need to be satisfied. The obligations to the families, to the general public, to the people who have made this thing happen, to historians, to the international community. You know, there are lots of obligations here that this thing carries.
The flint, the piece that comes furthest out.
Yeah.
If I'm at the ramp at the level where the the banding is up there, it's not so terrible. Right.
Quick phone call.
It doesn't have that.
The artifacts I want to get. I'll have them send over PDFs I get on my phone and we'll look at it.
And where my question is, what height are you against the artifact when you're at that distance?
You're almost at the top of it. Your eye line is going to be
So
right
that's
here.
below us?
Yeah, I mean,
The part that comes out furthest?
yeah, we can measure here and see. Do we have a man lift? Yes. So why don't we just take the man lift up to this height and see? Relative to that.
Okay, we'll let you. Do you anticipate this being closer in, or are we leaving it at this distance then and torquing it?
I think we could move in about a foot, but I don't think I'd want to go in any more.
Closer than this is really bad.
And I'm not sure we really need to move it in. If we've got the flexibility to support it out here.
The bottom is about that height where this piece is here, when this is actually in the right.
Yeah, the bottom
It's
is
about
about
there.
where the straps are.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit higher than that. That's probably a 10-foot ladder. It's quite astonishing. And then, of course, actually pulling it away, Fisher Morantz needs to probably ease it somewhat. It'll throw the shadows farther away where they're covered by some of the other lighting. But the other nice thing it does is really separate it from the volume.
Yes. Which is great.
So the columns are the only.
Yeah, the column, and then I want to see where we are with the ribbon at that
Yeah.
level. This is terrific.
I mean, the other thing too, Alice, is there's no reason the base of it couldn't come within a few inches of this.
This is the first time that we're actually seeing a simulation of how the artifact would be presented in the museum in vertical orientation at the entry to the historical exhibition. We've, all of us, only ever seen this piece lying prone. First at NIST down in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and then here at the hangar. So to get the full impact now of the piece in vertical orientation, which is what it was above the impact of Flight 11, to look at the scale of it, which is very different in the vertical orientation than it was on the ground, to imagine what visitors are going to feel viscerally when they walk below this and see the curvature that was created in these enormous pieces of structural steel by the nose of a jet airplane. It's very dramatic and very real in a way it hasn't been for most of us. You know, we look at, as you said, we look at renderings, we look at drawings, we look at sketches, we imagine it in our heads, and now we're really at a point where all of that imagining is becoming real. And it's thrilling and awe-inspiring.
Modifying that angle so that you tilt it back a little bit would give the piece more dynamism, and it would look less like a sculpture.
I'm not following, because how do we know that that's not the vertical member? If the plane went in this way, that's very likely the vertical member.
It is very likely the vertical member, but it's highly unlikely that this thing, this right angle is an art. There's no right angle over there.
Your conduit north-south. Yeah, north-south.
I just say that whatever you end up doing, all I want the visitor to be able to do in their mind is look at the top of that and understand that
Right.
absence. That void is what they're going to see.
Right.
That's what I want.
And this is not going to signal that so as clearly as one would like.
Decorative piece of 1/4 inch to give the same look as the other artifacts, you could do that.
Yeah, so what you're suggesting combined with what I'm suggesting,
And if it,
something like this, where we've got the, I'm going to angle it a bit. We've got the artifact as it is. It has this plate in the bottom of it.
right?
We would make a plate just a little bit smaller.
Right.
Actually, make a sleeve something like this.
It should be about at least a 1/2 inch smaller for
Yeah.
a weld, and then a decorative plate around the
And
outside.
something like this with a joint in it, perhaps, or we just do could just do a cut like that. Top.
Right? Yeah, if you want it on an angle.
Yeah, and then we just weld around it and mold it beneath.
Right.
And then we take this up somewhere around 1
Right.
foot.
Right, but here's where Justin comes in.
Yep.
Is Justin around?
That to me looks better already.
So we could do that.
Yeah,
Well, that changes the nature of what those things are
They
doing.
want to make it
Position that this thing is at a 90-degree angle, whereas there's nothing at 90 degrees over there, and that this actually distorts the artifact because it seems to say, oh, this is the way this was created, and then they cut it off and they slapped it down.
Is this an area of concern? This strength of this area?
The strength of the area?
No.
We're not attaching it.
Right.
That's good.
So all we're talking about is compression through here. And whether,
That would be very concerned.
yeah.
They're worried that this is going to start over time, like a lot of time.
We want to elevate it about a foot.
That will make Mark even happier.
Make it similar to the other mountains.
I'm fine with that. I actually would prefer that
And,
because, in fact, it wasn't low to the ground. Right. It was high.
right.
So I would like
It's
to.
not a piece of sculpture connected to
Yes,
the base.
yep.
That's the important.
So, I think we have to tie this conversation together with the engineering conversation because Justin's concern, since we did not do a 3D model of this, he feels like he doesn't have sufficient information to change how it's making him nervous. So I think we just have to make sure we're not giving a design direction that's going to.
So why don't you go talk to Justin?
Going to the artifact.
Mike, you want to help me with this tape? They want to take measurements, so I got this clip, so you just won't that sway in the level. He's going to be going around.
This particular move of mounting a piece of impact steel above the visitor's head onto the volume on the north footprint was so novel and unexpected, I think, and our breath was taken away, and we thought if they have that level of imagination and skill, that these are the people we wanted to partner with.
How many years ago was this?
It was 5 years ago almost. It was 2006.
For
4.5
us, this
years.
was the beginning. We saw this piece and we saw an opportunity for it that we thought hadn't been noticed. And so we put it up there, and we took it as a calculated risk because it was kind of going against the instructions. But we also saw what it looked like. We did a 3D model of what we thought it looked like, and looked at it from above, looked at it from below, and thought this is wonderful. This is too important.
Well, it's actually been an interesting journey because when the pieces were brought here to the hangar from NIST, from Gaithersburg, they were placed horizontally in relationship to each other. So you had the top piece on the right, the bottom piece on the left. And you could actually visualize the shape of the fuselage of the plane as it broke through these immense pieces of structural steel. And it gave us pause for a few moments, more than a few moments of, is that really a better way to display this, to convey what you're looking at? And we struggled with it. And I think very much in my mind, but also I think in the back of everyone's mind, was remembering the incredible visceral power of seeing the impact piece positioned as it was vertically, and looking at those pieces of steel pushed in by the nose of the plane. And I, for one, wasn't willing to sacrifice that. It was very, but we had to evaluate the pros and cons, and now the burden falls on interpretation to really convey how these two pieces, which don't look like they fit together, actually belong with one another.
We've actually been working on that as well, back in the office, of trying to think about how it is we can reunite these things in both of the different places where you view them from. One of the things that's so great about this being vertical is that as you come down the ramp, you look over into the west chamber, get whatever impression you have of the space, last column, turn around, come around the corner of the North Tower volume. That's where
visible.
This comes into view. So it's the first thing that turns from this place to what happened in this place as a physical entity.
That's right.
And the scale of the destruction. Then you move from there to other clues. You begin to see missing posters projected, and that takes you to the people who died. Then you move into the experience.
And you will, from the ramp, first see the top M2 artifact, and then as you go downstairs, past the survivor stairs, you see M27. You see the bottom. You may not know at that point that these two pieces are twins and fit together, but you will when you come down and experience them.
And in fact, until you actually get to the base of this, or to the base of that, you won't necessarily understand that they have anything to do with the impact. They're just bent pieces of steel. You know it's part of the wreckage, but you don't know its story yet. So when you encounter it a second time, then you learn its story.
And part of the way we've designed the museum, in fact, is to allow the visitor to write the narrative in their own head, if you know what I mean. 9/11 is a story that so many people will walk into the museum knowing some aspect about. And we don't have to start at a didactic level and say, this is what happened here. You need to know X, Y, and Z. People will come in with what we call an entry narrative. They experienced 9/11 as so many of us did all day long on 9/11. Those images are emblazoned into our consciousness, and they will come here, and part of the performance of the visitor in the museum is to actually write that narrative looking at these materials, and it will become coherent in that way. And I think that this is one of those examples where you will be presented with the artifact, you will see its power as an artifact without even knowing what it actually represents. And then as you go through the experience of the museum, its significance will increase as you begin to understand more of what it actually was.
One down.